Okay, we are looking at Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, and we are going to be trying to make a crayon resist. We're actually using oil pastels, but you could use crayons if you needed to, as long as you have something with enough oil or wax to resist the paint that will be going over top. So for this project, we're not worrying right now about the things on the ground. We're focused just on the sky, and we're going to be filling our paper with those swirling, dashed, moving lines and stars and windy lines and lots of color. So as I zoom in here, you can see there is a lot of color mixed in. When you look at the moon, you've got some orange and some blue and some yellow and even a little bit of brown and green in places. So we have a lot of options for color and a whole lot of lines, dashed lines and moving lines. And that spiral line that you see right in here is a really big part. These are characteristics that you see a lot in Van Gogh's work, just the repetition, the repeated dashed moving lines. So we're going to work on that. So I'm setting this to the side. I know that I want some white and lights and darks of blue as well, some green. I can even see some sort of cream colors in there. So sometimes the colors that you find are a little unexpected. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is start with a moon in the sky, and it's totally up to you where you place it. We're not tied to doing it exactly the way Van Gogh did as far as the placement goes. But thinking about the stars, I've pulled out a few colors from my oil pastels. This color is goldenrod, and it's kind of a mustard yellow, and this is a really pale yellow. This is called the green yellow from this set, and then this is just regular yellow. This is a regular yellow, and then this is actually a metallic gold. So you may have all of these colors in your set or only some of them, so just use what you have. I'm going to start up here with my goldenrod, but you could use a different shade of yellow or even orange if you want to. You could even use orange if you want, and I'm just going to go ahead and color that in. And the great thing about oil pastels is how you can actually go over them with other colors, and it mixes and blends just like paint. So I can come in here with this lighter yellow, and you can see it just kind of mixing in. And then I'm wanting to make that sort of circular shape around my moon that you see so often in Van Gogh's work. And then I also want to kind of give it some dashes, those dashed moving lines. So I'm just going in a circle while I create the dashed lines. And since we are painting over this for the watercolor resist, I also could add some white in here, and the white will show up after I paint it. Right now you won't really be able to tell. So I'm going to just kind of color some white in there. You don't have to do yours exactly like me. You just want to get a moon shape up there and add some dashes of color around it so we can see the movement in the sky. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for now, and then we're going to work on just sprinkling some stars around the sky. And you can look back at Starry Night and see that there were several stars sprinkled around. Some are really yellow with a warm sort of reddish center, and some are more white. So it's up to you. I'm just going to place a few. And I've gotten a little bit of green on the tip of my oil pastel, which is not a big deal, but you can always wipe it off if you start to see some marks that you don't want, some colors that you don't want mixed in. Okay, so your step right now that you're working on is just sprinkling around some stars. And don't worry too much about it being perfect. We're just kind of being expressive with it right now. And I'd like for you to experiment a little bit with how things mix, with how these pastels mix together, because they can almost look like paint. And don't forget those dashed lines. Those really make it look like it's Van Gogh inspired, his style. Okay, now I'm going to focus on getting these spiral moving lines into my background. Remember, we're not worrying about the ground space, only the sky space. So I've pulled out some blues and greens that I think will work well, and you can pull out the ones that you like. I've got the light blue, sky blue is what it's called. I've got a blue violet here. This one is sea green. This is violet. This is blue green. And finally just a plain blue. I think I'm going to start with my plain blue and come through with a big spiral line. And I'm starting with what I call a tail on my spiral. So it's just a wave right now. Remember when we were learning about those elements of shape, there are curved lines, and the spiral is one of those curved lines. So here's my spiral. It's just as if you're going to make a circle, but then you keep going inside more and more, getting smaller and smaller, and that's what makes your spiral. And you could have one with a tail that kind of goes off the edge of the paper, or you can make some that just kind of exist out in the middle of the space like that. And you can just kind of sprinkle them around, add some waves. Okay, just kind of spread them out. Some wavy lines, curved lines, spiral lines. And now I'm going to get my white, because I know, thinking back to Starry Night, that there were some big areas of white, and I want to make sure that I get that on there before I go any further. So I'm just going to take my white and kind of color in around these spirals. And the cool thing about your pastels is how they will blend a little bit. So that'll make that line kind of smudge and blend, which is fine. It makes it look a little more painterly. And you can add as much of the white as you want, or as little as you want. It's up to you. I'm going to just do that for now. And now I'm going to go back and get some other shades of blues and purples and greens. And then I want to just begin filling in my extra space with dashed lines. So all this sky space, I just want to make it look like it's moving with my dashed, curved, spiral lines. Lots of movement. I want you to notice how when I make those dashes, you hear it a little bit, but it's not like this. Okay, don't do that. That's really not good for our pastels, and it doesn't get much on your paper. So try to just draw the dashes or dots like this. That way you're not hearing it hit the paper so much. You will hear it a little bit, but we're not trying to bang on the table or the paper with our pastels. And it's okay to change direction too. So I want to take some of those spirals and just go around them. And the first thing I'm doing is just filling up that empty space with these dashed moving lines with my light blue. Okay, that's pretty full. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is come in with a darker color. I think this time I'm going to use my blue violet, and I'm going to speed this one up a little bit because you guys can do this on your own time as well. So watch me speed up, and then you guys go ahead and come back in with a darker color as well. Okay, and now I'm going to come back with one more color. I think I'm going to use, well, I'm going to pull out my greenish color. So I've got a sea green and a blue green, and I'm just going to mix those in a little bit, and then I'm going to finish off with some more white, and then I think I'll be finished. So I'll speed that up too, and then you can do the same on your paper. Okay, I have got a lot of my paper filled in, but you can still see a lot of white space. And that's why when you look at it compared to Starry Night, this is so much lighter and brighter, and there's a lot more depth and darkness back in here. So what I'm going to do next is use a dark blue to fill in all that white space, and my oil pastels will resist the water and the paint, so they will pop through. It's always kind of a surprise how it shows up when you do that final step of painting, because you can't see the white that's on here. When I put the oil pastel on here, I can't really tell where the white is. So I just have to hope that I got it in a place where it's good. So here we go, that's the next step. And now I am using our temper cakes to put a blue or dark blue onto my paper. And so if you're doing this with different materials, you could use watercolor palettes, just the small watercolor palettes that you would get from home. But in class, we're using the dry temper cakes. So I'm going to wet my brush and get some blue. I'm not sure if this is going to be dark enough yet, but we'll try it and see. Okay, and when I paint that blue on, all of those lines are going to pop through, and it's just darkening up that background space. This is kind of the magical part. Now, if there are some parts that you don't want to paint over, that's okay. I don't have to paint in here, but I can if I want to, and then it will just pick up little bits of blue where the white paper is left. So that's up to you. If you want to kind of leave your star spaces and not paint into them, that's fine, but you could paint over them, and the white space, the white paper, will pick up the blue paint. Okay, so I'm going to speed this part up, and then you are going to go ahead and finish yours up as well. Okay, and now I can take a look at it and I can easily see where I put that white on with the oil pastel pretty heavy because that part stayed white. You can see here where the paint has just beaded up on top of the oil pastel. So I can leave it like that to dry. Or I can take a paper towel and just gently blot that and it will come up. I just leave some little dots. Okay, so that's what we would expect because that's part of the oil resisting the water. That's part of the process. And then I can also look over it and see if there are any parts of the paint that I want to darken up. You can see how my paint is a little bit darker in here, and I kind of like that. I might want it even darker, and if that's the case, I can just go back and get more paint, but not a lot of water, and kind of go back over it. You just have to be careful because if you get your paint too thick, it could cover up your oil pastel. So I'm just going to go in and darken that up a little bit. Leave some places lighter and some darker. That gives it a lot of variation. And then I'm done. Now our next step will be adding something on top of this. And when you're finished, you are just going to pick this up with 2 hands and take it back to the drying rack. Remember that you go into the rack on the right and you come out on the left and go back to your seat so that you don't run into anyone with a wet paper. When you have a seat, make sure your brush is in the water and you are cleaned up and ready to go. Great job!